I really hope that you enjoy today's video. I've been working on this one for a little while now, and really if I was going to TLDR this for anybody who just doesn't want to necessarily hang out for the video, in summary, I think Final Fantasy XIV is the real winner when it comes to Asmongold playing Final Fantasy XIV. Now, the numbers I think clearly show this, but there's a lot of other big winners, and that's one of the things that I hope this video gets to explore and really kind of open your mind up to what is happening within the world of content creation, but more importantly, the MMO genre as a whole. Outside of that, guys, thanks so much for being here. If you feel like I earn it, like, favorite, subscribe, all that YouTube stuff, but more than that, I really hope you enjoy today's video. I love video games and I love data. It's been a real blast for me over these last few years to be able to dive into some of the most interesting subjects regarding gaming culture, streamers, and MMORPGs. And nothing could have excited me more when Zach, aka Asmongold, finally decided to come and play Final Fantasy XIV. My game. The game that I've spent the last 13 years covering, playing, and evangelizing this game and its community. Now, both because while I knew that there would be some growing pains with having the biggest MMO streamer step into Final Fantasy XIV, but what it could also mean for the game and the years to follow. Now, there's one thing I want to make absolutely clear in this video, is that regardless of how you feel about Asmongold, he is an authority in the MMORPG space. Now, he considers himself more of an entertainer. He might not even accept the label of authority, but that is the reality of it. That is the situation that we find ourselves in. And he is also the one who put up a lot of walls or barriers to playing Final Fantasy XIV with labels like Weeb Game and essentially keeping that at bay. But when he finally broke down those own barriers, he opened up the game and the world to many other players, making it acceptable, making it even profitable for other gamers and other streamers to come and check out Final Fantasy XIV. And in the end, Final Fantasy XIV as a game won. We've seen record numbers in terms of sales, in terms of streamers, in terms of content, in terms of server capacity over the course of this last year, and that's one of the things that I want to spend today diving into. Now, officially, this all kicked off on June 11th, 2021, when Zach sent out the tweet saying, "I will try Final Fantasy XIV. However, I believe that the wheels and the motions were long moving behind the scenes, and this moment marked a very historic one for the game itself and its community. And while the initial impact cannot be denied, was there a lasting impact on 14? And who were the big winners and the losers with this move? And that's what this video really hopes to explore, the lasting impact on Asmongold and on Final Fantasy XIV. Now, I think it's important to understand two things before we get into the data. Final Fantasy XIV has a cycle. It has repeated itself since ARR into Heaven's Word, and it looks like this. You have what is called the pre-expansion hype, the 0.5 beyond patch. So X.5, 1.5, 2.5, 3.5, and to going into the post-expansion burnout of X.1. Now, there are the biggest times and the most exciting times to actually play Final Fantasy XIV. Now, there are those like me who continue to play each and every patch, but in terms of the raw numbers, Final Fantasy XIV's busy season is at the end of the expansion and at the start of the next. The second thing that you really need to understand about Final Fantasy XIV, and that this video is going to actually focus in on, is the social aspect of the game. Now, if you want solid numbers like like subscribers and things like that, the only way you're going to actually get that is to go work for Square Enix, climb the ladder, and maybe they'll disclose them to you. Maybe if you get on the board or something like that. The point being, Square Enix and Final Fantasy XIV are doing just fine. This video is about mindshare, who really won. And now I think let's go ahead and dive into this amazing data and explore what we're talking about here today. First, I want to actually start with just the game Final Fantasy XIV on Twitch. I think this is really where we're going to see some very interesting bits of data. Now, we can see here over time the average viewers going back from June 2019 all the way up into June or July of 2021 when Asmongold actually started streaming the game. From here, obviously, we see kind of a return more to form, but overall, you can see here, generally speaking, the graph is trending upwards. Now, average viewers are those who are participating and consuming it, but that also relies on people actually playing and streaming the game. Right now, at the time of this recording, 9,900 average viewers are happening at this moment. Yesterday, that was just under 5,000, 30 days average, 5,300, 90 days, 8,000, and a year, 13,000 average viewers. So what does this mean? Well, you can also then compare this to the amount of channels that are averagely streaming it. There's going to have a correlation between people consuming and obviously people providing said content. What I really want to spend some time in here and kind of show you guys this is let's focus in. We'll take off peak and we'll take off peak channels. And you can see here with over the course of time, Final Fantasy has these nice little bumps. These bups, I guess, is what we're going to call it. But you can see here overall, the graph is trending upwards. Blue represents the average number of channels streaming the game. And you can see here, this is actually really pretty common. December, a ton of people started actually streaming the game. If you were going to ask my advice about how to get started into streaming and content creation, this blue line really needed to be this blue line. Typically, you'll see a lot of people jump on any kind of trends, and that's something natural within content creation. I'm not going to sit here and make judgment on it, but when it's coming down to the game actually being live, you don't see a huge spike in the actual amount of people watching. This is something very unique to Final Fantasy XIV, and while I see people get discouraged while streaming and playing this kind of content because you want to have that protected experience, more people are going to try and play. The only thing that would have actually had an impact positively on these numbers themselves is actually going to be the fact that they might not be able to play because they, with all the server issues and things like that. But you can see here clearly the biggest spike due to Asmongold's influence in this regards, and then it's kind of returning more to a normalized value. So you kind of have this massive hype season for Final Fantasy XIV right now, and you've seen various different hype seasons going about it. So obviously this isn't related to subscribers. I want to make that very, very clear. If people think that that's going to be related to subscribers, note that those values also fluctuate, but it really doesn't necessarily mean anything to us because it's nothing that Square Enix is going to give us. Let's talk about who really benefited from Final Fantasy XIV's rise and Asmongold breaking down the barrier. If we look at two of the most notable and highest value streamers in terms of watch time, if you take this out, you look at Preach and you look at Pyromancer. If we drill into Pyromancer just as a detailed look, you can see here overall massive Final Fantasy 93.6 by watch hours in terms of his content that he has played, his airtime, his peak watch, his average viewers, massive numbers for Pyromancer. And you can see here over the course of his content, looking back again into that July 2021, this is where you start to see massive growth and influx based off of obviously his viral video, but the barrier to breaking it down and him coming in and consuming the game and playing it has been like astronomical in terms of its rise. Now, if we take a look at Preach, massive numbers. Also, you can see here in terms of his gameplay and playtime, 90% of his watch hours coming from Final Fantasy XIV, 7.3% coming from Destiny 2, and 2.1% coming from Stranger in Paradise. And if we take a look at his trends, he's had a long career in history to see this trend line going up and up and up. But overall, you've seen that he's had a couple of big times back in the past, namely due to WoW. But now as we get into more of that 2021 look, he actually waited to step into Final Fantasy XIV. He did not jump on the July Asmongold rush. He wanted to play a few other games after stepping away a little bit from WoW. And it looks like, according to his watch time, at least he's not streaming World of Warcraft at this time. Now, I want to not discredit any of the names that you also see here on screen right now. There are some incredible content creators, and you can see here it's broken up by various different languages: German, Spanish, French, Korean, Italian, Chinese, and Japanese. overall Final Fantasy XIV as a channel is doing really well for itself in that regards. But if we want to now shift into a kind of a mindset this year versus last year in terms of numbers and the game's growth, last year experienced a 273% increase in watch hours. It had a 433% increase in peak viewers. Average viewers increased by 275%. The channels that actually stream Final Fantasy XIV increased by 120%. The average channel streaming the game increased by 71%. And finally, average viewers per channel is increased by 141%. Now, where do these numbers come from? This growth essentially is obviously attracting new players to the game. And so if we just look at obviously the biggest other MMORPG in the space, World of Warcraft, where a lot of these streamers came from, we've seen a transfer of those hours, not necessarily one-to-one. Like WoW, in their case, their hours were down 20%. The peak viewers down by 54%. Average is down by 19%. Average channels down by 10%. And average viewers per channel actually was up 41%. So what's really interesting in here is that despite of 2021 and all the issues that Blizzard themselves have faced, there hasn't been that big of a dip in terms of the average channels overall. So what does all this data end up telling us? What can we really derive from all of this whole maneuver that we've seen? And I think overall MMO in a genre has actually benefited from this move. We've seen more players willing to check out more games and find the good things within the genre itself. One of the things I've always found interesting about MMOs, specifically as a genre, it's a genre where good ideas go to die because good ideas can't compete with established ideas. And that's one of the things that I feel like with Asmon and with more people coming to play Final Fantasy XIV, you can start to highlight some of the really good ideas that Square Enix has delivered in Final Fantasy XIV, and that can also help benefit the entire MMO genre in and of itself. So, and now I want to actually step into Asmongold, who has quote-unquote stepped away from 14, who has quote-unquote come back to Final Fantasy XIV, or is coming back to Final Fantasy XIV, and just looking at his numbers for a little bit. Let's highlight actually over time. You can look here at July, but that does not even compare to what he's seen in terms of Lost Ark. In fact, when you look at his schedule and his timelines, overall with him and his sub-channel, Zakrar, like he obviously is doing incredibly well, but I don't think he's the real winner when it comes to him playing Final Fantasy XIV. I think Final Fantasy XIV is a game one. I think Pyromancer and even Preach have really won when it comes to playing Final Fantasy XIV and Asmongold's shift into the genre itself. Then beyond that, I think overall the directory itself, Twitch in and of itself, has won dramatically by this, with the attention, with the content, even with the various metas that we see form over on Twitch. That is something that I think has been really interesting overall to see. And then at the end of the day, it's going to be interesting to see what impact Asmon has when he returns to playing Final Fantasy XIV. Because right now, if you look at his hours, watch time, Lost Ark, Just Chatting, Elden Ring, New World, and World of Warcraft. And so Asmon is just going to be a variety MMO player, and that's going to overall, like every time he plays one of these games, based off of his weight and his authority as who he is, especially what he's built up within his brand, you're going to continue to see him grow from these communities, excited to see him play their game. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for your time. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Hopefully you enjoyed this discussion. As always, would love to know your thoughts in the comments below. Like, favorite, subscribe, and share if you feel like it earns it. Otherwise, I just hope you have a fantastic day, and hopefully I'll see you in my next video. But until then, take care.
Yeah. It's time to chill out on the couch and read some comments. That's right. You know me when it comes to destiny. I'm off with the clan, and I'm glad you're feeling better. Oh yeah.